You've heard the ancient stories of gods walking among mortals, seen the impossible monuments they left behind, perhaps even wondered why every civilization on Earth shares memories of divine beings who once ruled from golden thrones. But here's the cosmic truth that archaeological institutions and religious authorities desperately want to keep hidden. The Anunnaki star beings didn't simply fade into mythology or ascend to heavenly realms. They orchestrated the most carefully planned exodus in galactic history, abandoning Earth after a catastrophic war that nearly destroyed human civilization, and their departure triggered the consciousness suppression program that has kept humanity spiritually enslaved for over 4,000 years. The evidence of their physical exodus isn't buried in metaphorical scriptures or symbolic mythology. It's preserved in eyewitness testimonies, technological artifacts, and interdimensional gateway sites that still bear the energetic signatures of their cosmic departure. Long before the silence of abandoned temples echoed across ancient landscapes, long before humanity was left to stumble through the darkness of spiritual amnesia, there existed an era of such magnificence that its memory has haunted human consciousness for millennia. This was the time when the Anunnaki walked openly among their genetic creations, when Earth functioned as a thriving colony in an interstellar empire, and when human civilization developed under direct guidance from beings whose knowledge spanned the cosmos. The cuneiform tablets preserved in museum vaults worldwide aren't primitive religious texts or mythological fantasies. They're historical records of an advanced extraterrestrial civilization that established Earth as a mining colony and genetic laboratory over 450,000 years ago. These beings, who called themselves the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, possessed technologies that modern science is only beginning to comprehend. Their homeworld, Nibiru, followed an elliptical orbit that brought it into our solar system every 3,600 years, creating periodic windows for travel between their planet and Earth. During these approach cycles, massive motherships would arrive carrying personnel, equipment, and supplies necessary to maintain their extensive operations on our world. The Anunnaki didn't come as conquerors, seeking to dominate primitive humans. They arrived to find a planet rich in gold deposits essential for repairing their damaged atmospheric system. Their advanced understanding of atmospheric engineering had revealed that gold nanoparticles, when properly dispersed in a planetary atmosphere, could create protective barriers against harmful cosmic radiation while maintaining optimal climate conditions. Earth's abundant gold deposits made our planet the ideal mining site for their atmospheric restoration project. But the scale of extraction required to save their dying world demanded massive labor forces and sophisticated technological infrastructure that would transform our planet into the nerve center of an interstellar operation. The first Anunnaki expedition, led by the brilliant scientist Prince Enki, established their initial base at Eridu in the Persian Gulf region. This wasn't simply a settlement, it was a high-technology command center equipped with communication systems that maintained real-time contact with Nibiru, genetic laboratories for analyzing terrestrial life forms, and manufacturing facilities for producing the tools and equipment necessary for large-scale mining operations. The initial phases of the Anunnaki mining operation relied on their own personnel for the dangerous and physically demanding work of extracting gold from deep underground deposits. But the harsh conditions of Earth's mines, combined with the limited number of Anunnaki willing to leave their home world for extended periods, created labor shortages that threatened the entire atmospheric restoration project. The solution proposed by Enki represented one of the most audacious genetic engineering projects in galactic history. Rather than simply importing more workers from Nibiru or developing robotic systems, the Anunnaki would create an entirely new species by combining their own advanced genetics with the most promising hominid species already present on Earth. This wasn't crude experimentation or accidental hybridization. It was precision genetic engineering using consciousness transfer technologies and DNA manipulation techniques that modern science has barely begun to understand. The Anunnaki possessed complete knowledge of genetic codes, consciousness interface systems, and the biological requirements for creating stable hybrid species. The early experiments conducted in Enki's genetic laboratories beneath Eridu produced various hybrid forms as the Anunnaki scientists worked to achieve the optimal balance between human adaptability and Anunnaki intelligence. Some experiments created beings of enormous physical strength but limited cognitive abilities. Others produced highly intelligent hybrids whose consciousness was incompatible with terrestrial conditions. The breakthrough came when Enki successfully created a stable hybrid that combined human physical adaptability with sufficient Anunnaki genetic material to produce enhanced intelligence, extended lifespan, and most importantly, the neurological compatibility necessary for limited consciousness interface with Anunnaki control systems. This new species, initially called Adamu, meaning one made from Earth, represented the first successful merger of extraterrestrial and terrestrial genetics. These beings possess the physical strength and environmental adaptability necessary for mining work, the intelligence required to operate sophisticated equipment, and the neurological structures that allowed their Anunnaki creators to monitor and direct their activities through consciousness interface technologies. But the genetic engineering project had unintended consequences that would eventually threaten the entire Anunnaki operation. The human Anunnaki hybrids began developing capabilities that exceeded their original programming, including independent thought processes, emotional complexity, and most dangerously, the ability to reproduce without Anunnaki oversight. As the hybrid human population grew and mining operations expanded across multiple continents, the Anunnaki found themselves governing not just a mining colony, but an entire planetary civilization. The success of their genetic engineering project had created intelligent beings capable of complex social organization, technological development, and cultural achievement that rivaled many galactic civilizations. To manage this expanding civilization while maintaining operational security, the Anunnaki established a sophisticated governance system that combined direct oversight with delegated authority through carefully selected human intermediaries. This system, preserved in ancient texts as divine kingship, represented one of the most advanced colonial administration models ever implemented by an extraterrestrial civilization. The great cities of Mesopotamia functioned as administrative nodes in a planetary control network that allowed a relatively small number of Anunnaki to govern millions of human beings across vast territories. Each city specialized in different aspects of the overall operation, while maintaining communication with the central command systems at Nippur. Eridu, under Enki's direct control, served as the primary genetic research facility where ongoing modifications to human DNA were tested and implemented. The temple complex contained sophisticated laboratories for consciousness transfer research, genetic storage systems for preserving successful hybrid lineages, and training facilities for human specialists who would serve as intermediaries between Anunnaki authorities and human populations. Nippur, commanded by Enlil, functioned as the mission headquarters with communication systems that maintained contact with Nibiru, monitoring networks that tracked activities across all Earth operations, and the decision-making facilities where policies affecting the entire planetary colony were formulated and implemented. Uruk, under Inanna's passionate but often reckless leadership, became the cultural and artistic center where human creativity was channeled into projects that served both aesthetic and operational purposes. The elaborate festivals, artistic productions, and cultural innovations that emerged from Uruk weren't simply entertainment. They were sophisticated psychological management tools designed to maintain human loyalty and productivity. The temple complexes in each city weren't merely religious structures. They were high-technology installations equipped with communication arrays, consciousness interface systems, and the manufacturing facilities necessary to produce the tools and technologies that maintained Anunnaki control over human populations. The priests who served in these temples weren't simply religious functionaries. They were trained technicians who operated advanced equipment, maintained communication with Anunnaki authorities, and implemented the consciousness programming that kept human populations focused on their assigned roles in the mining operation. The Anunnaki colonial system, despite its sophisticated design and advanced technology, contained inherent contradictions that would eventually lead to its downfall. The most fundamental problem was the success of their genetic engineering project. They had created beings who combined human adaptability with Anunnaki intelligence in ways that made them potentially capable of independent development. As successive generations of human Anunnaki hybrids matured, some began developing capabilities that exceeded their original programming. Enhanced psychic abilities, technological intuition, and most dangerously, the capacity for strategic thinking that allowed them to understand and potentially challenge the system that governed their existence. The royal bloodlines, which carried higher concentrations of Anunnaki genetic material, began producing individuals whose intelligence and capabilities rivaled their extraterrestrial creators. These enhanced humans weren't content to serve as mining supervisors or temple administrators. They began developing their own ambitions for power and independence. The situation became critical when some Anunnaki personnel began forming personal relationships with their human charges that went beyond operational necessity. These relationships weren't simply romantic entanglements. They were consciousness bonds that created hybrid offspring with unprecedented combinations of Anunnaki and human traits. Marduk, Enki's ambitious son, recognized the potential of these developments and began cultivating human allies who shared his vision of an Earth-based empire that would rival Nibiru itself. His supporters included both Anunnaki personnel, who preferred Earth to their home world, and human hybrids, whose enhanced capabilities made them suitable partners rather than mere servants. The conflict that emerged wasn't simply a family dispute between Anunnaki brothers. It was a fundamental disagreement about the future of Earth and humanity's role in galactic civilization. Enlil and his supporters wanted to maintain the traditional colonial model, with Earth serving as a mining outpost governed by Nibiru-appointed authorities. Marduk and his faction envisioned Earth as an independent world where Anunnaki and human consciousness could merge to create a new type of galactic civilization. This vision threatened the entire Anunnaki imperial system and set the stage for a war that would determine the future of multiple star systems. The Tower of Babel incident represented Marduk's first direct challenge to Enlil's authority, an attempt to construct an independent space facility that would allow Earth-based operations to maintain contact with other star systems without routing communications through Nibiru's control networks. When Enlil destroyed the tower and scattered its builders, he wasn't simply asserting religious authority. He was preventing the establishment of an independent communication system that could have coordinated rebellion across multiple Anunnaki colonies throughout the galaxy. The conflict that had been building for generations finally erupted into open warfare when Marduk declared himself supreme ruler of Earth and began actively recruiting support from both Anunnaki personnel and human populations across multiple continents. This wasn't merely a local uprising, it was a direct challenge to the imperial authority of Nibiru that threatened to destabilize Anunnaki control over numerous colonial worlds. Marduk's strategy was brilliantly conceived and executed with the precision of someone who understood both Anunnaki technology and human psychology. Rather than attempting direct military confrontation with Enlil's forces, he built a coalition that combined advanced technology with mass popular support in ways that made traditional Anunnaki control methods ineffective. His power base in Babylon became the center of a liberation movement that attracted Anunnaki who preferred Earth to their homeworld, human royalty who wanted independence from extraterrestrial oversight, and hybrid populations who saw themselves as the rightful inheritors of Earth rather than permanent servants to distant masters. The technologies Marduk deployed weren't simply weapons. They were consciousness amplification systems that allowed human minds to interface directly with Anunnaki equipment, thereby multiplying the effective capabilities of his forces while reducing their dependence on pure-blood Anunnaki personnel. Enlil's response revealed the desperate nature of the situation from the perspective of traditional Anunnaki authority. When conventional military forces proved insufficient to suppress Marduk's rebellion, the Anunnaki High Council authorized the deployment of weapon systems that had been held in reserve for absolute emergencies. These weapons of terror weren't conventional nuclear devices. They were consciousness-disrupting technologies that could destroy not just physical structures, but the spiritual and psychic bonds that connected consciousness to physical form. The devastation they caused wasn't simply material but existential, affecting the very fabric of reality in the targeted areas. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, along with the other cities that supported Marduk's rebellion, represented the use of technologies so advanced that their effects are still detectable in the archaeological record thousands of years later. The evil wind that swept across the region wasn't radioactive fallout. It was a consciousness-disrupting field that separated souls from bodies and created dimensional distortions that made the affected areas uninhabitable for generations. But the deployment of these weapons achieved a Pyrrhic victory that ultimately destroyed everything the Anunnaki had built on Earth. The consciousness disruption affected not just Marduk's supporters, but the entire planetary grid that maintained communication between Earth and Nibiru, severed the psychic bonds that connected human populations to their Anunnaki rulers, and created dimensional instabilities that made continued operations increasingly dangerous. Most catastrophically, the weapon's consciousness-disrupting effects began affecting the Anunnaki themselves, severing their connections to the source intelligence that had originally guided their civilization and transforming them into the fallen beings described in later religious texts. The aftermath of the consciousness-disrupting weapons created conditions on Earth that made continued Anunnaki operations impossible. The psychic networks that had allowed a relatively small number of extraterrestrials to govern millions of humans were shattered. The communication systems that maintained contact with Nibiru were damaged beyond repair. Most critically, the consciousness fields that connected the Anunnaki to their cosmic heritage were disrupted in ways that threatened their existence as evolved beings. The evacuation that followed wasn't a hasty retreat, but a carefully planned operation designed to preserve as much as possible of their technological and genetic legacy while removing Anunnaki personnel from an increasingly unstable planetary environment. The process took several decades to complete and was witnessed by human populations who preserved detailed accounts of their god's departure. The prophet Ezekiel's vision provides one of the most detailed eyewitness accounts of Anunnaki departure technology. His description of the whirlwind coming out of the north, with a great cloud with flashing fire and bright light around it, matches advanced spacecraft propulsion systems that use controlled dimensional distortions to achieve interstellar travel. The 4 living creatures with metallic bodies and wheels within wheels that moved in any direction without turning weren't supernatural beings. They were the crew of an advanced spacecraft equipped with multidimensional navigation systems. The crystalline platform and throne Ezekiel observed were the command center of a vessel designed for consciousness interface rather than mechanical control. The sounds Ezekiel described, like the voice of the Almighty and like the sound of an army, match the acoustic signatures of dimensional drive systems that manipulate space-time through consciousness-directed energy fields. His account preserves technical details of Anunnaki departure technology that modern aerospace engineers are only beginning to understand. Similar departure accounts are preserved in Babylonian astronomical records, which describe lights moving against the stars and thunderous sounds that descend and vanish. These weren't random observations, but systematic documentation by temple astronomers whose sacred duty involved monitoring divine activities. The priestess Ada Gupi's autobiographical inscriptions provide another crucial eyewitness testimony. Her account of the moon god Sin leaving his temple and later returning briefly before departing for good describes the phased evacuation process used by Anunnaki administrators to transfer authority to human successors while removing essential technologies and personnel. The departure process involved more than simply boarding spacecraft and leaving Earth. The Anunnaki implemented systematic memory modification protocols designed to transform historical events into mythological narratives, thereby concealing their true nature and preventing future human populations from developing technologies that might threaten Anunnaki interests. The Anunnaki evacuation from Earth didn't involve direct flights to their distant home world of Nibiru. Instead, they utilized a sophisticated interplanetary transportation system that included Mars as a crucial staging area for personnel and cargo transfers between Earth and the outer solar system. Ancient Mesopotamian texts describe Mars, known to the Sumerians as Lamu, not as the barren wasteland observed by modern astronomy, but as an active operational base equipped with facilities for spacecraft maintenance, cargo processing, and personnel transfers. The planet's lower gravity and thinner atmosphere made it ideal for launching the large vessels necessary for interstellar travel. Archaeological evidence supporting Martian Anunnaki operations includes the artificial structures observed by various space missions, geometric formations that suggest engineering rather than natural formation, and the presence of atmospheric anomalies that indicate past industrial activities. The infamous face on Mars and nearby pyramidal structures weren't products of imagination or photographic artifacts. They were remnants of the installations that supported Anunnaki operations throughout the solar system. The systematic evacuation process involved transferring personnel and equipment from Earth to Mars during the regular supply runs that had maintained Anunnaki operations for millennia. Once sufficient resources were accumulated at the Martian facilities, larger vessels designed for interstellar travel could be loaded and launched toward Nibiru or other Anunnaki territories throughout the galaxy. This staging system explains why the Anunnaki evacuation took decades to complete rather than occurring as a single massive departure. The transportation infrastructure required careful coordination between Earth-based operations, Martian transfer facilities, and the interstellar vessels that would carry evacuees to their final destinations. The technology involved in this evacuation process far exceeded anything available to human civilization at the time. The spacecraft, observed by witnesses like Ezekiel, utilized consciousness-driven propulsion systems that manipulated dimensional fields rather than relying on chemical rockets or mechanical thrust. These vessels could travel between planets in days rather than months and were capable of carrying far more cargo than conventional spacecraft of comparable size. The Martian facilities also served as quarantine stations, where Anunnaki personnel could be treated for the consciousness disruption effects caused by the weapons deployed during their civil war. The dimensional distortions created by these weapons had affected some Anunnaki so severely that they required extensive rehabilitation before they could safely return to their home world. While the primary Anunnaki operations were centered in Mesopotamia and the Middle East, their global mining network required launch facilities in multiple locations to optimize cargo transportation and maintain operational security. The most sophisticated of these installations was located in what is now Peru, where the enigmatic Nazca lines provide unmistakable evidence of advanced aerospace operations. The geometric patterns etched into the Nazca Plateau weren't primitive religious symbols or astronomical calendars. They were functional infrastructure for spacecraft operations. The perfectly straight lines extending for kilometers without deviation represent flight paths and approach vectors for craft using consciousness-guided navigation systems. The geometric shapes mark landing zones, cargo areas, and maintenance facilities for the fleet of vehicles that transported gold and other materials from South American mining operations to the Middle Eastern command centers. The famous animal figures visible only from high altitude weren't decorative art, but operational symbols that provided navigation references for incoming spacecraft. Each figure corresponded to specific approach procedures, cargo classifications, or personnel assignments in the complex logistics system that connected Anunnaki operations across multiple continents. The construction of these markings required technologies that could remove surface materials with precision impossible using primitive tools, create perfectly straight lines across varied terrain without surveying equipment, and maintain geometric accuracy over distances that challenge modern engineering capabilities. The preservation of these markings for thousands of years in an environment that should have erased them suggests the use of materials and techniques far beyond conventional Bronze Age capabilities. During the evacuation period, Nazca served as the primary western departure point for Anunnaki personnel and equipment being transferred to Mars and beyond. The plateau's elevation, isolation, and optimal positioning for spacecraft operations made it ideal for the final phase of the evacuation process. Ancient Andean legends preserve memories of sky beings who taught advanced technologies before departing westward across the Pacific Ocean. The bearded, white-skinned god Viracocha, who promised to return from the same direction he departed, represents a cultural memory of Anunnaki operations and their eventual evacuation through the Nazca facility. The alignment of Nazca markings with astronomical phenomena wasn't accidental. These alignments served as navigation aids for spacecraft operating between Earth and other worlds in our solar system. The precision of these alignments demonstrates understanding of celestial mechanics that far exceeded the capabilities of pre-Columbian civilizations. The Anunnaki evacuation involved more than simply removing personnel and equipment from Earth. It required implementing systems that would prevent human populations from developing technologies or memories that might threaten future Anunnaki interests. This consciousness suppression protocol represented one of the most sophisticated psychological warfare operations ever conducted. The first phase involved systematic destruction of technological infrastructure that had allowed humans to interface with Anunnaki systems. The temples that had served as communication centers were stripped of their advanced equipment and converted into conventional religious structures. The genetic laboratories where human enhancement research had been conducted were destroyed and their locations concealed. Most critically, the consciousness interface systems that had allowed enhanced humans to access Anunnaki databases and communicate across dimensional barriers were disabled, and their access codes changed. Humans who had possessed near-divine capabilities found themselves suddenly cut off from the cosmic information networks that had made their abilities possible. The second phase involved systematic modification of human memory and cultural records. Advanced psychic techniques were used to implant false memories that transformed historical events into mythological narratives. The genetic modifications that had created enhanced human capabilities were reversed or suppressed, reducing most of the population to baseline human consciousness levels. The royal bloodlines that carried significant Anunnaki genetic material were either eliminated or driven into hiding, where they maintained their enhanced capabilities but were forced to operate in secret to avoid detection. These hidden bloodlines became the foundation for mystery schools and secret societies that preserved fragments of Anunnaki knowledge while concealing their true origins. The third phase involved establishing religious and educational systems designed to maintain consciousness suppression across multiple generations. The mythological narratives implanted during the memory modification process were institutionalized as religious doctrines that discouraged investigation into humanity's true origins while promoting dependence on external authority figures. Educational systems were designed to suppress natural psychic abilities and technological intuition, while promoting materialistic worldviews that denied the existence of consciousness beyond physical matter. Medical systems were established to treat manifestations of enhanced human capabilities as mental illness or supernatural delusion. The long-term effects of this consciousness suppression protocol have shaped human civilization for over 4,000 years, maintaining populations in states of spiritual ignorance and technological dependence that prevent the redevelopment of capabilities that might challenge Anunnaki interests. The completion of the Anunnaki evacuation left Earth in a state of cosmic isolation, unlike anything experienced since their original arrival hundreds of thousands of years earlier. The communication networks that had connected human civilization to galactic consciousness were severed. The technological systems that had provided access to advanced scientific knowledge were disabled. Most tragically, the psychic abilities that had allowed humans to perceive their cosmic heritage were suppressed or eliminated. Human civilization didn't collapse immediately. The infrastructure and knowledge base left by the Anunnaki was sufficient to maintain basic social organization and technological capability for several generations. But without access to the cosmic consciousness that had guided human development, civilizations began fragmenting into competing factions that fought over the remnants of divine authority. The great cities of Mesopotamia gradually declined as their populations forgot the true purpose of the technological installations they had inherited. Temples that had once served as interdimensional communication centers became conventional religious structures focused on ritual rather than actual contact with divine intelligence. The royal bloodlines that had carried Anunnaki genetic enhancements either died out or went into hiding to preserve their capabilities from persecution by populations that no longer understood their true nature. The scientific knowledge that had allowed human participation in galactic civilization was lost or fragmented into primitive superstitions. Most devastatingly, human consciousness itself began contracting as the suppression protocols took effect across multiple generations. Psychic abilities that had been common among enhanced humans became rare gifts possessed by isolated individuals who were often persecuted as witches or madmen by societies that had forgotten their cosmic heritage. The historical period following the Anunnaki departure saw the rise of empires based on military conquest rather than divine authority, the emergence of religions focused on worship of absent gods rather than direct communion with cosmic intelligence, and the development of materialistic philosophies that denied the existence of spiritual reality. But the Anunnaki had been careful to preserve certain elements that would allow for their eventual return. Hidden bloodlines maintained genetic markers that could be reactivated when conditions were appropriate. Secret texts preserved in mystery schools contained encrypted information about humanity's true origins and destiny. Most importantly, consciousness suppression systems were designed with built-in expiration dates that would allow for gradual awakening as the cosmic cycles approached the time of return. Despite the systematic consciousness suppression implemented during the Anunnaki evacuation, complete elimination of humanity's cosmic memories proved impossible. The genetic modifications that had enhanced human consciousness left permanent imprints in human DNA that manifested as persistent cultural themes, religious concepts, and artistic expressions that preserved fragments of extraterrestrial contact. The universal human fascination with flight and space exploration represents genetic memory of the aerospace technologies that once connected Earth to galactic civilization. Every culture developed myths of flying gods, winged beings, and celestial vehicles that carried heroes to divine realms, cultural expressions of suppressed memories of actual spacecraft operations, religious concepts of divine hierarchies, cosmic battles between good and evil, and promised returns of savior figures, all derived from distorted memories of Anunnaki politics and the civil war that led to their evacuation. The widespread belief in prophesied end times, when divine beings will return to establish cosmic justice, preserves awareness of the cyclical nature of Anunnaki presence on Earth. Architectural traditions that emphasize massive stone construction, precise astronomical alignments, and geometric perfection represent cultural memory of Anunnaki building techniques and technological capabilities. The persistence of these traditions across cultures that had no contact with each other demonstrates the deep genetic imprinting of extraterrestrial influence. Artistic traditions depicting human-animal hybrids, giant beings, and technological devices that appear anachronistic for their historical periods preserve visual memories of genetic engineering experiments, Anunnaki physical characteristics, and advanced technologies that once operated on Earth. The emergence of mystery schools and esoteric traditions that claim access to ancient wisdom represents the preservation of Anunnaki knowledge within hidden bloodlines and secret societies. These groups maintained fragments of cosmic knowledge while concealing their true origins to avoid persecution by consciousness-suppressed populations. Even modern scientific developments in genetics, consciousness research, and aerospace technology represent the gradual reactivation of suppressed human capabilities as the cosmic cycles approach the time scheduled for Anunnaki return. The Anunnaki evacuation wasn't intended as permanent abandonment of Earth, but as a strategic withdrawal timed to cosmic cycles that would determine optimal conditions for their return. Ancient texts preserve detailed prophetic timetables that correlate celestial events with the reappearance of divine rulers and the restoration of cosmic order. The 3,600-year orbital cycle of Nibiru serves as the master clock for Anunnaki operations throughout the solar system. During approach phases, communication and transportation between Nibiru and Earth become feasible using their consciousness-driven technologies. During distant phases, contact is maintained through automated systems and strategic installations on intermediate worlds like Mars. Current astronomical observations suggest that we are approaching another Nibiru approach phase, as evidenced by gravitational anomalies affecting outer solar system objects and the increasing numbers of unidentified flying objects observed by military and civilian witnesses worldwide. These phenomena represent advanced reconnaissance and preparation activities preceding the main return event. The consciousness awakening occurring throughout human populations, increased interest in spirituality, psychic phenomena, ancient mysteries, and extraterrestrial contact indicates that the suppression protocols are reaching their programmed expiration dates. Genetic memories are reactivating, psychic abilities are manifesting with increasing frequency, and awareness of humanity's cosmic heritage is spreading despite official attempts at concealment. Technological developments in genetics, consciousness research, artificial intelligence, and space exploration are converging toward capabilities that would allow human civilization to resume its role in galactic affairs. These developments aren't accidental, but represent the reactivation of suppressed human potential as cosmic conditions align for renewed contact. Religious prophecies describing end times, divine intervention, and the establishment of cosmic justice all point toward the same time frame for transformative events. The convergence of different prophetic traditions around similar themes suggests coordination by intelligence that operates on cosmic rather than merely human timescales. Modern political, environmental, and social crises that appear to threaten human civilization may actually represent planned stress tests designed to accelerate human consciousness evolution and prepare our species for reunion with its cosmic family. As evidence mounts that we are approaching the time prophesied for Anunnaki return, humanity faces crucial choices about how to prepare for renewed contact with our genetic creators. The consciousness suppression that has maintained human isolation for millennia is breaking down, but the awakening process creates both opportunities and dangers that require careful navigation. The genetic memories reactivating throughout human populations provide access to capabilities that were suppressed during the evacuation period, but these abilities require proper understanding and training to develop safely. Individuals experiencing spontaneous psychic phenomena, channeled communications, or recovered memories of past lives connected to ancient civilizations are actually accessing their Anunnaki genetic heritage. The technological developments occurring in genetics, consciousness research and space exploration represent preparation for resumed participation in galactic civilization. But these technologies can be used for liberation or further enslavement, depending on who controls their development and application. The political and economic systems that currently govern human civilization are incompatible with cosmic citizenship and will require fundamental transformation to accommodate the consciousness, expansion, and technological advancement necessary for galactic participation. The religious and educational institutions that have maintained consciousness suppression for millennia will either transform to support human awakening or collapse as their deceptive foundations are exposed by returning cosmic awareness. Most crucially, humanity must choose whether to welcome the returning Anunnaki as liberating ancestors or resist them as invading conquerors. This choice will determine whether human consciousness evolution continues toward cosmic citizenship or reverts to the servitude that characterized earlier periods of extraterrestrial control. The preparation process requires both individual awakening and collective transformation. Personal consciousness expansion through meditation, study of ancient knowledge, and development of psychic abilities must be combined with social organization that supports rather than suppresses human potential. The story of the Anunnaki Exodus represents more than historical events that occurred millennia ago. It describes the cyclical pattern of consciousness evolution that governs the development of intelligent species throughout the galaxy. The departure of our cosmic creators initiated a phase of independent human development designed to test whether our species could achieve cosmic citizenship through its own efforts. The consciousness suppression that followed their evacuation wasn't intended as permanent enslavement, but as a necessary isolation period that would allow human consciousness to develop authentic spiritual abilities rather than remaining dependent on external technological enhancement. The suffering and limitation experienced during this isolation period represents the birth pains of genuine cosmic awareness. The prophesied return of the Anunnaki marks not the restoration of ancient servitude, but the graduation of humanity into galactic citizenship. Our species has demonstrated the ability to survive cosmic isolation, develop independent technologies, and maintain genetic potential despite systematic suppression attempts. The awakening currently occurring throughout human populations represents the successful completion of humanity's cosmic education program. We are remembering our origins, reclaiming our abilities, and preparing to resume our place among the advanced civilizations that guide consciousness evolution throughout the universe. The choice facing humanity isn't between freedom and slavery, but between cosmic participation and continued isolation. The returning Anunnaki offer partnership rather than domination to a species that has proven its worthiness through millennia of independent development. The technologies and capabilities that will be restored through renewed contact aren't alien impositions, but the reclamation of our genetic heritage. Human consciousness was designed to operate at cosmic levels, and the return of our creators will remove the artificial limitations that have constrained our development. The transformation approaching Earth represents the fulfillment of prophecies preserved in every religious tradition, the resolution of the cosmic exile that began with the Anunnaki departure, and the beginning of humanity's active participation in the galactic community that awaits our awakening. As the cosmic cycles align and the signs of return multiply, we stand at the threshold of the greatest transformation in human history. The gods, who departed in fire and glory, will return to find not the primitive servants they left behind, but a mature species ready to claim its cosmic inheritance. The silence that has haunted Earth for millennia is ending. The stars are calling us home, and the children of the Anunnaki are finally ready to answer. May the eternal light of cosmic consciousness forever guide your path as you prepare for humanity's return to the stars. The Exodus is ending, the return approaches, and the greatest adventure in human history is about to begin.